So yeah, good evening everyone. See the ninth question. Technology is an indispensable tool in disaster management. Explain the role of GIS in context to the above statement, giving recent examples from India. Yeah, try this question. Ninth one. Give the framework. Good, Suman. Good framework for the answer. Yeah, good. So basically, technology is an indispensable tool in disaster management. So what do you mean by this is, in the context of disaster management, what is the intervention of technology? Okay. It's a very evident fact over the last 2.5 decades that technology as a value addition to the disaster management and its role in the disaster management has been extremely significant. Just yesterday, we were discussing about how the super cyclones can now be identified, including the minute or second when they are trying to move away from the, the coastline or into the sea. So that is the kind of technology intervention we have. And that has been definitely useful in fighting the risk which disaster poses. Hence, you can start introducing how technology is indispensable and an important part of disaster management in the present day dynamics. Now, what is GIS? GIS is Geographic Information Systems. So what is basically GIS stands for? What is the use of GIS? GIS is, it is used in the mapping. The basic advantage of mapping GIS is mapping of locations and tagging them so that they can be identified. Okay, mapping of locations and then trying to locate them in the context of mapping. So what is the role of GIS? So how do you use GIS in the context of disaster management is the question. First thing is, you can map the disaster prone areas. So you can use GIS across the PMRR, that is the prevention, mitigation, recovery and the rehabilitation. So in all the stages, you can integrate it with GIS. And then what are the things you can say with regard to GIS for prevention? The first thing is this zonation mapping. We were discussing about the zone 2, 3, 4, 5 and high risk zone, low risk zone. So we were talking about the earthquake zones. How is it possible? With the GIS. The zonation mapping can be done and the risk profiling of each and every area and its impact with regard to the disasters can be easily monitored. That is the first advantage. And by using different satellite images, especially the remote sensing satellites, we can try to get the information regarding the dynamics of that particular place during the disaster. And then by understanding the changes in the weather through the remote sensing satellites or the weather satellites, we can assess the impact of disaster like cyclones on that particular area. And we can also know the macro level and the micro level impact on these particular areas through the GIS. So all these are important parts of the application of GIS in the disaster management. Okay, so that is the important part where the technology as an indispensable tool becomes part of the disaster management. Based on this, what are the mitigation strategies? Mitigation strategies are when we know that a particular place is prone to the disaster, we can make the people in that area aware about how their future growing potential would be and ensure that the growth of that area would be in a sustainable way. What would be the recovery? We can track the dynamic nature of the disaster with the help of GIS. Continuous inputs can be taken and the recovery and the way to handle those particular disasters can be planned by the civil administration or the district administration. And rehabilitation, we can move them to the better places. For example, if an area is impacted by flood, we can immediately assess which area will not be impacted in the nearby area and move people to that particular highland or the other place. So this is how throughout the process of disaster management, the technology in general, GIS in particular, can help a lot in trying to reduce the impact of disaster. Hence, you can say in the context of climate change, disasters are becoming more and more frequent, and the need of the hour is to have a proper intervention of technology in countering these disasters, and GIS is one of the tools in reducing the impact of the disasters. Clear?
Yes,
so who has written this question? Kedar. He is coming after many days. So Kedar, we'll see. Kedar, you can slightly come from the technology part and then talk about the GIS, where the integration of information is available. Technology is an important tool in preparing for disaster, and there are many tools within the technology to attack this particular issue. Among them, GIS is one of the prominent thing where the integration of information is possible. So that would be a much better way of coming to the demand of the question. Okay, and then role of GIS, use of different, yes, satellite images, good. Preparation of base map of different themes using satellite images, yes. Thematic maps, as I told, the hydrogeomorphological map, slope map, terrain map. So based on this, you can plan the mitigation of the risk also. So these points you try to segregate in the PMRR: prevention, mitigation, recovery, and rehabilitation. Response and rehabilitation. So that way you can actually integrate the GIS into 4 stages of disaster management, and then it will look much more clear that yes, this particular technology is not only useful in some part, but the holistic way of handling the disaster. Okay, good. Yes, zones for rehabilitation. So you could have, you have actually written the points pertaining to all the different phases of disaster management. If you could have segregated them, it would add much value addition. Your conclusion is slightly casual. Okay, you have to be it's like, you know, very colloquial conclusion. So try to make your conclusion in a much professional way and in the jargon of the disaster management.
yes, sir.
I hope you are understanding what I mean when I say jargon of disaster management. the things like, the vulnerability or the zonation mapping, such things should reflect in your conclusions and introductions so that the examiner will understand that, yes, you know what you are trying to say. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.